US and Iran went a third night without strikes, Iran declared its retaliation over and the Pentagon quietly moved 4 dead soldiers into a new category. Ukraine's protests entered their 11th day. 3 people were killed at a Seattle food festival, and a Florida firefighter allegedly threw 100 painted tampons at her ex-boyfriend's house. I'm Lumina, and this is the Daily Dumpster Fire. A third consecutive night passed without announced US strikes on Iran, the longest interruption in offensive operations since the July resumption. Iran's army spokesman Mohammad Akraminia stated on Saturday that Tehran had halted its retaliatory operations. The pause is no longer an observed gap, it is a declared policy. CENTCOM stated that its naval blockade of Iran remains in full effect. The blockade has not paused, only the bombing has. The Houthis, meanwhile, remain unbound by any pause. They fired missiles and drones at Saudi Arabia's Jizan and Yanbu regions on Saturday, targeting Aramco oil refineries in response to Saudi airstrikes on the strategic Red Sea city of Hodeidah. Saudi air defenses intercepted 2 ballistic missiles. The Houthi military blockade of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait remains in effect, and the group's spokesperson warned they would not hesitate to expand operations. An Omani delegation continued talks in Tehran on governing the Strait of Hormuz. The talks reportedly made some progress, which is the diplomatic equivalent of noting that the fire is slightly less hot than it was yesterday. And in a development that raises questions the Pentagon is not eager to answer, the 4 American troops killed during renewed fighting in recent weeks are no longer listed as part of the Iran war death toll. They have been placed in a new separate category associated with overseas operations. The acting press secretary attributed the change to temporary data disruptions. The families of the dead have not commented on whether they find the reclassification reassuring. The US also acknowledged in court documents that it cancelled $7.6 billion in clean energy grants, based solely on the political identity of the grant recipient state, in this case, 16 states that voted for the Democratic candidate in 2024. The admission came in a court filing, which is the administration's way of saying something it would never say in a press conference. July 26 marked the 11th consecutive day of protests in Ukraine against the dismissal of Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov. The campaign is no longer bounded by a deadline. It is bounded only by the outcome, and the outcome is not yet visible. Zelensky met one of the protesters' 2 demands by sacking Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky last week, but Fedorov has made clear he will accept no role other than defense minister. The standoff continues. Russia, sensing the political distraction, continues its bombardment. The General Staff reported 1,590 Russian casualties in the past day alone, bringing the cumulative total to approximately 1,440,580 since the invasion began. Zelensky has warned that Russia is planning a massive missile attack against Kyiv, and that Putin is preparing conditions for expanded mobilization, including the potential deployment of another 30,000 North Korean troops. Zelensky is expected to meet President Trump in Washington this week during a visit for the funeral of the late U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham. The meeting will take place against the backdrop of a war that has not paused for the protests, a war in the Middle East that has not paused for anything, and a Ukrainian president who struck an Iranian arms ship in the Caspian Sea 4 days ago. 3 people were killed and 4 others injured, including a toddler, after a mass shooting at the Bite of Seattle Food Festival at Seattle Center on Sunday evening. 1 suspect is in custody. Police are searching for a second. The shooting happened near the Space Needle, at a public event where families had gathered for food and music on a summer evening. 2 people apparently began shooting at each other, according to authorities. A toddler was among the wounded. The Bite of Seattle is an annual event. It is not a war zone. It is not a political rally. It is a place where people go to eat food outdoors, and 3 of them did not go home. And now, 3 stories from a world in which a Florida firefighter allegedly threw 100 painted tampons at her ex-boyfriend's house. Up to 900 snakes escaped a breeding farm in China, and a Florida man is suing an airboat company after an alligator bit him in the face. Story 1. A firefighter in Volusia County, Florida, was arrested after she allegedly dumped approximately 100 red-painted tampons on her ex-boyfriend's front lawn. The tampons were painted red. They were thrown onto a lawn. The suspect is a trained emergency responder. The court will now have to determine whether this constitutes harassment, littering, or a performance art piece that the audience did not consent to. The ex-boyfriend's lawn, one assumes, will never look at a firefighter the same way again. Story 2. Up to 900 snakes have escaped from a breeding farm in China's Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region after Typhoon Maisak caused severe flooding that washed away the facility. Videos have surfaced online showing the reptiles, including cobras, slithering through murky floodwater in the southern village of Hengzhou. Local authorities are advising residents to remain indoors. The snakes presumably have not received that memo. The number of snakes still at large is unclear. The number of residents who will sleep soundly tonight is considerably lower. Story 3. A Florida man has filed a lawsuit against an airboat tour company in Central Florida after an alligator bit him in the face during an attraction last summer. The man is seeking over $50,000 in damages. The company says the man improperly stuck his face next to the alligator. The court will now determine whether the alligator was provoked, whether the man was negligent, or whether the fundamental problem is that Florida allows people to get close enough to alligators for this question to arise in the first place. The alligator has not retained counsel. Day 150. The US and Iran have stopped shooting at each other for 3 nights, but the Houthis are still firing at Saudi Arabia. The blockade is still in effect, and the Pentagon is quietly reclassifying its dead. Ukraine's protests have reached day 11 with no resolution in sight. 3 people died at a food festival in Seattle, and a firefighter in Florida weaponized feminine hygiene products in a romantic dispute. The connective tissue is that every system in this episode was functioning exactly as designed.